my work is, when I make my work, it's developed, it begins through geometry in this kind of intuitive, felt geometry. And what's happening was that as I was trying to construct something, the geometry of this place kept showing up. And it was like, I'd do something and it would be the geometry of this place. It would be like a landscape. And I thought, if I'm going to be true to myself and true to what I really believe, then I have to really start to paint. I don't think I also now don't think I'm really a landscape painter, but there's certainly things in the painting that you recognize. The work that interests me or the work that moves me, like a Cezanne, uh, where in looking at the painting, you're also looking at not just a thought process, because I think it's, for me, it's something that Milton Resnick said, and Milton Resnick says that you have to become the servant to the painting. And I think that in the beginning of painting, or starting the painting, you're the boss. I'm the boss. I'm saying what's going to happen and what's not going to happen, and I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I'm doing this. And that's really, I think, like a thought process. That's about thinking. But it's not about feeling. And then at a certain point, like the rationale or for doing something in a painting really has, there's no rationale. There's no form, really. Well, no, that's wrong. Certainly is a form. Uh, there's no system. And I really believe that, and this is, I use these two terms, which is really counter to the way scientists use it. But I'll say that in making a painting, you can either be involved with a system or a method. And someone who, like Roy Lichtenstein or Chuck Close, like their system is really clear. They know precisely how to start the painting, what the middle of the painting is going to be, and what the end painting is going to look like. They know how to move through that. Where with a method, and I think of someone like Cezanne, who had a method of investigating a painting or investigating making a painting. So that I think that, yeah, you have to have a form and a method, but within that form and method is that at a certain point you have to become the servant to the painting, and that the painting dictates what's going to be, like what's going to be done to it. And there's no real rationale for that. You can't say, oh, I did this because of blah 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 blah. It's like you just simply have to do that. It's really young growth here. I mean, this place has been logged and grown and logged and grown. I don't know, probably 10 times, 12 times, even more. So I don't know if it's because of the young growth that occurs here, that it's so dark, that you look into the woods and it's so dark. And I find that the longer I'm here, when I first got here, I noticed the volume of the things that were in this space. I noticed the volume of the trees, or there was like this incredible volume. Then I started to see and feel the volume of the space. Like, yeah, it's not just the trees in the space, but the space itself has volume. And now what I'm starting to see is the light also has volume. And I think if there's anything that the paintings I'm working on now are, it's about that. And it's something I'm pushing really, really hard to try to get to, is the notion of gaze and place. And depending upon what that gaze is, then the place will change. Or depending, so anyway, hey Kitty. So what uh, the yeah, so the place are kind of, when I start to do the geometry and start to work with the geometry, it's like constructing places that I recognize. They might not be specific, but it's like that I recognize them in some way. And it's like, well, what is the gaze of that place? And then the paintings in the studio that I'm working on, which are uh, the most difficult, are single trees. And they really are like portraits in a sense. And I mean, I think that the most abstract paintings that I've ever seen are Rembrandt portraits, because there's no composition. There's just shoulder and head. And so that in order to realize, though, it has to be just pure painting. It can't be something which is compositional. So that with the paintings I'm working on now, there are, and there's like 5 paintings, and then there's a 6th one, which is larger, which is very compositional. And then some of the other, then there's paintings which are more atmosphere and hanging on to being a landscape by a hair's breadth. Um, but anyway, that's what interests me, is gaze in place. The thing that's amazing about being here, and as the chainsaw went off behind there, is it's not somebody asked me what it was my paintings were about, like what was I painting about. At which I said that I wanted to paint silence before it disappeared. And that's something that, like being here, because even though that chainsaw goes off from some neighbor someplace, uh, I I can spend days without even hearing a car go by. And that kind of notion of not just uh, the gaze, but it's also uh, the quietness of that gaze.